Lee is an ordinary college girl who gets stuck in a death loop on a public bus and travels back in time each time it explodes. She tries to fight her way out and even fakes a heart attack, but eventually wastes her first 5 chances to escape. When the 6th cycle begins, Seo, her seatmate, wakes up as well and reaches into his bag to pull a pack of tissues for her sweaty face. However, his rusty zip lands his elbow in a very fortunate spot on her chest, lighting up an idea in her mind. While Lee apologizes for his mistake, Lee gets creative and pulls him by the hand to accuse him of being a molester. As Seo's reputation lands in the gutter and everyone on the bus begins shit-talking him, Lee rushes to the driver and begs him to let her off the bus. Previously, he had refused to do so, since rules don't allow him to let anyone off midway, even in a zombie apocalypse. However, after much urging from the other passengers, he lets Lee off this time. Relieved to finally evade her death, even if by playing dirty, she pulls Seo with her too in hopes of saving one more life. However, as the bus leaves, watching her smile like a shameless liar only boils his blood, and he suggests they head to the police station to clear his good name. Lee refuses, saying there's no need, and walks away after uttering a simple apology, leaving him hanging like a clown. Fighting back the urge to blast her there and then, Seo decides she's not worth his time and calls a cab instead. On the other hand, Lee enjoys a few moments of fresh air until she hears the blast again, and while reeling from the shock, gets hit by karma in the shape of a motorbike. She hurts her head and ends up in a hospital. Meanwhile, as the bus burns away, nothing remains of its victims. At the hospital, while recovering from her injury, Lee spots a zombie Seo being brought in on a stretcher. It turns out that his cab was close to the bus when it exploded and he couldn't escape his fate. Meanwhile, the captain of the crime squad, Detective Zhang, and the police director investigate the case and discover the footage of Lee and Seo getting off the bus, which they find fishy. Zhang's stuck-up sidekick heads to the hospital to interview Lee, but because of her messed-up memory from the injury, she mixes up the events from all 5 cycles, leading him to almost blow his fuse. However, Zhang saves the day just in time and takes over from his impatient ass. During their discussion, Lee's memory begins to return, and she speedruns the detective through all 5 cycles and how she ended up in the 6th one. And though he doesn't believe her bullshit, Zhang attentively listens to her. Unfortunately, the interview is cut short when he suddenly receives a call about Seo's foreseeable demise and abruptly leaves. On the other hand, Seo takes his final breath and cannot be saved. Surprisingly, in a twist of fate, he wakes up on the bus again and another cycle begins, this time with both Lee and Seo as its participants. Seo is a bit shaken up and begins to tell himself it was just a dream. However, his delulu is challenged when Lee wakes up and realizes he recognizes her from the previous cycle. Happy to finally have someone to run in circles with, she pesters him by narrating their last encounter. However, Seo decides it's too early for his suffering to begin again and switches seats. When she still doesn't stop acting like an annoying 4-year-old, he runs up to the driver and asks him to let him off. The driver obviously refuses, but that's when Seo begins to panic and grabs on the steering wheel to make the bus stop. This is met with retaliation from a wannabe influencer on the bus and a muscled macho, both of whom grab Seo and push him on the floor. Lee tries to explain to him how none of this has worked for her before, but just as he whines about needing to get off at all costs, the bus crashes into an oil truck once again and blows up. When the cycle repeats, he still acts like a spoiled kid and refuses to listen to Lee. This time around, he uses the emergency hammer to shatter a window and break out of the bus, only to be restrained by the musclehead again. The passengers meet the same fate as the bus meets the accident once again. However, as the next cycle begins, Seo calms down and for once, listens to the self-proclaimed time-traveling guru Lee. She deduces that he got swept into the cycle when she pulled him off the bus 2 cycles ago, and explains to him how getting off the bus has either been difficult up until now or completely futile. With her brand new plan to make the bus stop altogether, she takes her fake heart rate to the driver once again and asks if he'd stop the bus for a second for her to breathe, only for her plan to get wrecked by the old lady on the bus who carries her own little pharmacy. As Lee feigns gulping down a blood pressure tablet, the woman lectures Seo on how to raise up his girl better, and the defeated duo switches gears to try to avoid the accident from happening. The tactic works as they warn the driver about the delivery man, the root cause of the accident, and he narrowly escapes colliding with the oil truck. However, their victory celebration doesn't last too long, as not long after, Lee hears a suspicious ringtone and the bus explodes once again, this time without any accident. They both wake up in panic to the discovery that there's a bomb on the bus, which will go off whether the accident happens or not. To save their asses, Lee accuses Xiao of being a molester, which works, and they manage to get off once again. She immediately informs the police of the bomb, but as the operator keeps asking her personal questions, Xiao tells her to hang up and switch her phone off. After a bunch of policemen gets dispatched to the site, the duo heads to a bridge to observe the scene, only for the bus to meet the accident once more. Xiao notes it happened at 1:42 p.m., and they head to a park to discuss what to tell the police if they investigate them. Meanwhile, Zhang and his men begin to suspect Xiao and Li's involvement with the accident and dispatch a unit to their location in the park. Back at the accident site, the investigators find pieces of a bomb while Xiao takes out a paper in the park to jot down everything up until now. After going over all the cycles to this point, they discover that each time they wake up, they move back a minute, and that every time the explosion happens from the accident, it happens at 1:42. Li wonders, since both of them survived this time, whether the cycle will repeat or not, but Xiao explains that from his immense gaming knowledge, it needs to keep repeating until they save all the passengers on the bus. He also encourages her to be honest with the police when they are questioned, though Li is a bit skeptical, since Zhang thought she was deranged the last time they talked. Just as they are arguing over this, Zhang and his men find them and take them to the station. They are kept in different interrogation rooms while Zhang's right-hand man, Zhang, collects the paper on which Xiao listed their findings and begins suspecting them. Zhang interrogates Xiao, who immediately begins telling him about the cycles and time traveling, only for him to believe he's popping pills. As the director orders a drug test for him, Li is interrogated by Zhang, but refuses to say much until she accidentally calls him by his name. Zhang is certain he hasn't introduced himself to her yet and questions how she knows, leading her to narrate their encounter at the hospital during the 6th cycle. Since she's right about the details of his bad right hand, he listens to her entire story attentively, but wastes all her effort by not believing her once again. Xiao, on the other hand, finally realizes why Li was so skeptical about their seemingly sci-fi fantasy and insists that there's a bomb on the bus, assuming he'll be let off if it is discovered. The drug tests turn out to be negative, and though the director is sure neither of the two has a motive, when she receives a report about the discovery of explosive remnants on the bus, she heads to Xiao's interrogation room and arrests him as the prime suspect of the incident, citing that no one would have known about the bomb except the perpetrator. As Xiao realizes he's the dumbest person in the room, Li falls asleep. She wakes up on the bus again, this time almost at the previous stop, but finds it hard to awaken Xiao, who seems to be in a shock coma. He wakes up after she lets him fall off her shoulder, but the next few minutes between them are awkward as Xiao struggles to apologize to her for not trusting her, and Li finds her growing affection toward him hard to show. They eventually communicate and discover that the cycle repeats itself when they fall asleep at the same time. Furthermore, Xiao reveals that there's an actual bomb on the bus, which makes Li wonder why they haven't tried telling everyone about it yet. However, as soon as she tries this daring tactic, the bomb gets blown and the two of them get barbecued. The next cycle repeats with the horrifying realization that they are sharing their ride with some psycho and begin to look around, deducing who might be the one carrying a suspicious bag with the bomb inside it. Excluding the influencer and the jock since they aren't carrying a bag, they also cross out the old lady with the medicine bag and begin to wonder if it could be the other woman with a red bag. Right then, Xiao realizes that the weirdo who sits in the back still hasn't gotten on the bus, and Li also recalls how he appears like a social outcast, who could be an ideal candidate for bomb carrying. However, instead of trying to act like heroes this time, they decide to get off on the next stop, and while Xiao observes the weirdo through the window, Li's dumbass calls the police to alarm them of the bomb once again. Rolling her eyes at her non-existent intelligence, Xiao hides behind the bus stop and signals her not to address him, since they are being watched, and while she still whines, he brings them to a nearby park without CCTV coverage. As they argue over the call to the police and Xiao lectures her for having too high a moral compass, Li says she would still get on the bus and try to save everyone even if she had the chance to not get on it at all. As guilt seeps in, Xiao takes her to a bridge from where they watch the explosion once again, blissfully unaware of Zhang's death. Li gets a call from the police and volunteers to head to the station after leaving Xiao with her phone number. Later, while Li is being interrogated, the director suspects Xiao's involvement and sends a search team for him. Xiao, on the other hand, abandons the auction of his game and heads to an internet cafe to gather information about the explosion. Back at the station, as Zhang questions Li, she sticks to her time loop bullshit, making it hard for him to believe her. Right then, Xiao calls her and tells her once she sleeps, all will be well. The police track his location using his GPS and dispatch a team led by Zhang to bring him in. Xiao turns his phone off and rushes out of the internet cafe in search of a drugstore to buy some sleeping pills. Unfortunately, to make the payment, he has to turn his phone on, which alarms Zhang about his location. As he rushes out of the store and finds a place to hide for a while, Li talks to the director back at the bureau and admits how she would have gone crazier than she is already if she had to bear the burden of repeatedly dying without Xiao's support. The director obviously doesn't believe her and orders a blood test to see if she's high or just a lunatic. Meanwhile, Zhang finds Xiao passed out on the streets and carries him to the police station while Xiao finds himself stuck in a weird nightmare. The next time he wakes up, he's back on the bus with Li's dimwit staring back at him. Xiao apologizes for acting like a wimpy loser, and Li apologizes for acting like a one-ape superhero, after which they collectively decide to become unemployed detectives before seeking Zhang's help this time. Just then, the masked weirdo gets on the bus and the duo fakes a lover's quarrel to let him lower his guard. However, just as they begin snatching his bag against his resistance, Li hears the same suspicious ringtone and the bus blows up once again. The cycle repeats, and this time, Xiao takes action and thrashes the weirdo for secretly taking pictures of his self-proclaimed girlfriend, which leads to another quarrel, which ends with the weirdo getting an asthma attack. However, even as Li tries to take his bag away while he's gasping, the guy tries to protect it and seemingly perpetuates another blast. During the next cycle, the duo is fairly certain that he's the criminal and gets off the bus at his stop to strangle him. Just as the driver leaves them to their teenage drama, Li finally unzips his bag, hoping to see a bomb, only to discover a cat inside it, which jumps out and runs away. With both of them left at a loss for words, they help find the cat for the weirdo and apologize for borderline assaulting him. Li lies that they thought the bag belonged to Xiao, who lost it on the bus a few days ago, and the stranger buys it. Just then, the bus explodes in the distance once again, and though the weirdo is rattled by it, Li and Xiao casually leave the bridge. She's excited to assume that the new guy, who they just pulled off the bus, will join them the next cycle, while Xiao's masculine jealousy gets in the way. They head to the internet cafe to gain more info on the bus explosion and order enough food to start a mukbang channel, abusing the fact their money will be returned in the next cycle. Furthermore, they decide to gain as much info on the passengers as possible in hopes of narrowing down their list of suspects. Starting with the influencer, the king, whose follower cult hosts an event by the accident site. The duo attends it, only to be ambushed by the masked weirdo, who believes they know something about the explosion and threatens to call the police if they don't spill the beans quickly. As Li and Xiao surrender before him, he leads them to a shopping district that appears to be every nerd's dream, and eventually to his anime-inspired dream house. After introducing his cats to his newest guests, the guy settles down and begins his sob story about how he's always loved cats, but his mother never allowed him to have one because he's asthmatic. Li says she already knows and begins explaining the loop theory to him when he questions how so. Surprisingly, his only concern is why it's happening in May when in the fictional world, time loops always occur in August, since 8 is shaped like infinity when observed sideways. He instantly gets on their bandwagon too and says he can't wait to save the world, only for Xiao to remind him he hasn't entered the loop yet. Later, as Li informs him of all the passengers and the types of luggage they were carrying, he finds it fishy that a man would carry a suitcase on a route that does not lead to the airport. Unfortunately, their discussion is halted when his mother calls him to return home for dinner. Before leaving, he finally introduces himself as Lu, the apostle of cats, like a true man of culture. Left confused by his name, Xiao suggests they head to a nearby hotel to spend the night, but after noticing all the couples in its vicinity, Li's thoughts get dirty. On top of it all, she discovers that the room they'll share only has a single bed. However, before she can jump to any conclusion, Xiao enters the picture with 2 packs of instant noodles and takes his seat in front of the monitor like any veteran gamer, disappointing her love-struck fantasy. Meanwhile, Lu's nagging mother discovers cat fur on his clothes and reprimands him for keeping things from her. This emotional roller coaster causes him to have an asthma attack, and after he barely overcomes it behind closed doors, he scribbles a goodbye note in his diary. Back at the bureau, the director, along with Zhang, checks CCTV footage from all bus stops and finds Li, Xiao, and Lu's encounter sus. Lu gets the first call, and as he heads off to the station, his overly emotional mother gets in the way again, only for her level-headed husband to give her a shut-up call and accompany his son instead. On their way, his father tearfully thanks God for saving his son from getting blown up on the bus, while Lou watches him quietly, recalling the note he wrote earlier, in which he looked back at the lonely life of a weeb he has lived, and mentioned how he will finally become somebody his parents would be proud of now that he has two friends who want to save the world with him. Tragedy strikes when his mother discovers this note, not long after he leaves. On the other hand, Lee scrolls through the news and reads stories about the heroic deeds of the bus driver, Wang, and recalls how he has helped her in the past too. Xiao reassures her they still have many cycles to save him and everyone else, and heads to TikTok, only to discover strange comments under King's videos, many of which point at one of the old men on the bus and call him scary. Just as they discuss whether he could be the culprit, Lee receives a call from the police station. The suspicious old man on the bus is Ma, who has been convicted for a hit-and-run accident in the past. One day, when he excitedly met his wife while doing time, she told him to cut all ties with her and her son since his absence from their lives had given their son some incurable daddy issues. She also believed they would never be able to hit the rich daughter-in-law jackpot if her criminal husband was around, and butchered her own marriage for her son's non-existent future girlfriend. Back in the present, Lou and Lee stick to their initial story about the stolen bag, which Zhang ends up believing more or less, while Xiao tries to direct Zhang's suspicion toward the two old men on the bus, one with a suitcase and Ma, who carries a woven bag with utmost care. Eventually, Lee also points out how sus the man with the woven bag was, though she believes the bag had watermelons in it. Zhang finds it hard to believe that a bunch of tweens are so well informed about a road traffic accident, but the director shrugs him off and initiates an inquiry into Ma. They discover his criminal record, his broken family, and the fact that he worked as a farmer before he died on the bus. His wife and son are called in for interrogation, and as Lee is let off, she overhears a conversation between Ma's wife and an officer. Using her pro-eavesdropping skills, she learns that May has been convicted of manslaughter in the past. Meanwhile, his son opens up to Zhang about his emotional baggage and suspects that the family of the man who died because of his father might be the one behind this bus attack. Later, Lee manages to talk to Ma's son alone and learns that he blames himself and his wimpy little ass that pushed his father away for his accident. Right then, Lou's meddlesome mother barges into the police station with his goodbye note and reprimands him for writing it. The diary ends up in Zhang's hands and raises his suspicion of Lee and Xiao, while Lou's father finally takes a stand for his son and asks his wife whether she has ever treated their son with respect. He further reveals he's already aware of Lou's secret cat heaven in the anime district, and the two embrace each other, resolving any remaining family issues between them. On the other hand, as Xiao and Lee's misfortune brings them back to the interrogation rooms, they begin chanting their time loop stories once again like two lifeless corpses, until they doze off for good and end up back on the bus. This time, they are full of hope on the assumption that Lou will become their ally. However, when he gets on the bus, they discover that he has no memory of the previous cycle. Disappointed but not surprised, Xiao switches to the other plan and goes after Mo's woven bag in a fit of rage. As he and Lee argue over a fake issue, he tramples on the melons, only to be pushed to the floor by the old man. As King intervenes and implores them both to apologize to one another, the old man mourns the fact that he can't share these beautiful fruits with his beloved son now. Seeing his despair, Lee poses as his son's colleague and tells him his son misses him very much and boasts how tasty his father's crops are all the time. Touched, Min distributes all the broken pieces of melons among the passengers and dies a peaceful death when the bus explodes again. The man with the suitcase, Jiao, is an immigrant laborer who was working odd jobs before he got on the bus that blew him up. His friend suggested he work as a delivery man one night while having a drinking party, but he realized he couldn't do it since he had to support his daughter's education and didn't have enough to buy a motorbike. The following day, his landlord added to his misery by kicking him out of the garage he was staying in and even took all of his money in the name of last month's rent. In exchange, he handed him his worn-out suitcase in hopes of being rewarded with the Kindest Man Ever award. Back in the present, as a new cycle begins, the duo decides to go after both Joe and the lady with the red bags since both of them appeared indifferent to Mez's delicious watermelons in the previous cycle. Lee begins with the woman and discreetly approaches her in search of some lady's stuff, but all she receives is the woman's bombastic side eye. Using her shamelessness as a weapon, she manages to glance inside her bag, only to discover there's a pressure cooker. Finding it strange, she probes her to tell her what's inside it, but she cuts off the conversation with the simple term, meat. Lee returns to her seat, and though she still finds her sus, Xiao reassures her it's normal to carry food in a cooker, and that they can try their luck on Jiao instead. When the next stop arrives, they both stand by the door to knock his suitcase off the first chance they get. However, he tugs at Lee's bag instead and opens up his suitcase consisting of only his belongings, and hands her a pack of sanitary pads, hinting that he overheard her previous conversation. Certain that the perpetrator is the woman with the red bag, Xiao tells Lee to get off the bus and rushes toward her to grab the cooker. However, the woman sets off the bomb instantly, frying them both. When the next cycle begins, Xiao doesn't wake up even as Lee keeps on shaking him, which moves her to tears. However, when the other passengers on the bus come forward and try to get the bus to stop, he suddenly gasps for air and pants. As the dust settles, Lee realizes that they woke up at the same time as the previous cycle and worries that the time loop might be coming to an end. With this, they suffer the moral dilemma of whether to get off at the next bus stop and live or stay on the bus and fight a psychopath. They unanimously choose the second option, and as Lou's stop comes, they lie about dropping a USB on the floor and begin looking for it. As the gap between them and the woman closes, both Xiao and Lee grab onto her makeshift bomb, only for the psycho to pull out a second weapon and fatally stab first Xiao and then Lee. As they live through the horror of watching each other die before their eyes, the woman sets off the bomb once again, sending them into another rewind. They wake up gasping for air and use their emotional trauma for romantic development, deciding to get off on the next stop and move on with life. However, when the time comes, Lee betrays Xiao like every sacrificial female lead and pulls the stupid stunt of trying to overpower a terrorist. Expectedly, the woman pulls out her dagger, only for Xiao to make his comeback as Lee's personal bodyguard. As the two begin to struggle for the possession of her blade, the woman gets stabbed by Xiao, who gets labeled as a lady killer. Too stunned to care about the bomb, Xiao gets off the bus with Lee and his blood-stained face, while the bus blows up into smithereens once again. While the police begin their investigation, Lee and Xiao walk back to the previous stop, where the psychotic woman got on the bus. It's a local village with minimum CCTV coverage. This forces the Bureau to dispatch a unit of policemen to track them, since they are the prime suspects in the bomb blast. While Zhang's team gathers info on Jiao, whose bad luck doesn't leave him even in death, Zhang's team narrowly misses Xiao and Li as they make their way to a house with an outdoor water supply. While rinsing the blood off of himself, Xiao throws up and has an emotional breakdown. Li tries to tell him to man up since they need to run, and that he isn't the one at fault when the other person was trying to hurt him. However, he states that he'd rather be blasted on a bus than paint his hands in blood. Meanwhile, Zhang learns that the woman carrying the cooker lived nearby and set fire to her garage a few days ago. While he investigates this case, Xiao and Li flee on a pickup truck, outrunning Zhang by only a split second. During this great escape, Xiao tells Li to let him be the only one to receive the punishment. However, she states she'd follow him to the ends of the earth if she could. Initially, he yaps about his shitty luck, convinced that there won't be a next loop, but later calms down and throws his phone out. Li copies his move, but it only triggers him once again, and he tells her to save her own ass since she has the chance to. When she refuses, he cries that he can't erase the memory of hurting somebody from his mind, even if time rewinds itself once again, making her question why he even got on the bus if keeping his hands clean matters to him so much. He answers that he couldn't let her get hurt once again, which makes her heart flutter, though she hides it with her poker face. As Zhang's team follows their GPS, Zhang informs him about the lady with the cooker, namely Tao, and how her garage caught fire after an explosion some time ago. The team finds it sus, but decides to focus on the targets at hand, only to be left in a bind after discovering their discarded phones. On the other hand, fate brings Li and Xiao to Lu's anime district, but as they get out of the truck, the driver catches them. Muttering an apology, they make it to Lu's hideout, while the police director narrows their escape route down to the truck they got on. Li fails to find anything to treat Xiao's wounds with at Lu's place, but does find a piggy bank with all his life savings. She volunteers to head to a local pharmacy and dons a costume to blend in with the rest of the weebs on the streets. On her way back, she realizes that Zhang has already narrowed down their location, but he luckily doesn't recognize her with her outrageous getup. She rushes back home to find Xiao stressing over a video of himself from the afternoon and reading how the comments are absolutely thrashing him, but decides she has no time for his drama queen meltdowns. She hands him an outfit to cover himself up and tells him to grow a pair as the police close in on them and break through Lou's door. Surprisingly, they find it empty since the duo has escaped from the rooftop to another house nearby. As Lee bandages Seo's arm, she notices that he's still knee-deep in his despair as he reads about how the journalists are linking his violent game designs to this recent scandal. Back at the police station, as the families of the bereaved await more information, Lou's father notices via GPS that his son's tablet is active and on the move. Just as he informs the police about it, hoping for a miracle, Seo takes this tablet to meet with his friend. As soon as he opens the door, his friend begins to trash-talk him, and what he's done, but Seo tries to explain that it isn't as simple as it looks. He further asks him to delete all info related to him on the recent game they created, and render it however he likes to make sure that it sells. However, his friend still doesn't buy it, and tells him to go and confess to his crimes. Heartbroken, just as Seo leaves with Lee, the police come knocking at his door, only to learn that his buddy has already left. Meanwhile, the duo watches the sea from afar with Seo determined to give himself up and savor his potentially final moment with Lee. His reese makes her heart flutter, but she plays it cool, only to be swept into the night's soft romantic breeze and can't help embracing him. Seo waits for Lee to fall asleep before heading to the police station, only to fall asleep on the way himself and find that he's stuck in a nightmare again. He wakes up with Lee's power of love, and with budding romance in their arsenal this time, they decide to play policeman. With warnings about the bomb and the culprit written out on their phones, they approach all the passengers one by one and pose as college students to get them off at Lou's bus stop. Lee's emotions almost mess up the plan as she impulsively tries to involve the driver too. However, Seo prevents it in the nick of time. When the next stop arrives, all the passengers panic as they get off, and the commotion alarms Tao, who sets the bomb off. The duo returns from their 4th of July trip back into another time loop, and realizes that the bomb will be set off if they aren't discreet enough. They also realize that taking the bomb out of the bus at the next stop won't be enough since the people at that bus stop will be endangered indiscriminately. To counter this, they decide to overpower Teo on the bridge over the river instead and seek help from Jio, the driver, and Lou. Jio is easily convinced once Seo poses as a policeman. Lou is convinced when he is info dumped with his secrets, asthma diagnosis, and family drama. Finally, Lee manages to explain to the driver the situation and asks that he open the bus doors on the bridge so she can take the bomb away and dump it in the river. Surprisingly, everything goes smoothly when it's the time for action. With the old man's help, Seo easily overpowers Tao, and with Lou's help, they manage to get the bomb. However, when it's time for the driver to hit the brakes, he somehow becomes deaf to Lee's pleading. In another twist of events, Teo begins to yell out his name like a record scratch and calls him a wimp who's too afraid of dying. This strikes a nerve and he hits the brakes. However, he still refuses to open the doors and waits for the clock to strike 1:45. Seo realizes he's involved in the drama too, but isn't ready to take any of his shit. With the jock's help, he lets go of Tao and uses the emergency hammer to shatter the window, only for it to be too late. Lee wastes the next cycle on an emotional outburst, as she recalls all the times driver Wong has helped her in the past and barges up to him to ask why he's doing something so heinous, while Tao laughs like a psychopath and blows the bus again. When the cycle rewinds once more, Lee and Seo decide to get off at the next stop and recall how it was the driver all along who jeopardized all their plans before. Lee also recalls from her first interview with Zhang that in case of a molester being on the bus, the driver is supposed to stop it and call the police. She realizes what she mistook for his kindness was the fact that he didn't want to end up in jail and curses her Navy. Setting all of this aside, they head to the driving office to get more information on Wong and pose as college students who want to interview him. The clerk takes out some documents on him, but gets distracted when news about the explosion breaks. The duo uses this time to read the files and flees before the clerk returns. They learn that he quit his previous job 4 years ago and moved to their city as a bus driver on account of his wife's job transfer. Lee suspects that Teo is Wong's wife, but Seo doesn't understand why he lived in a hostel if that was the case. After this, they go off to investigate this hostel, only to find his door locked. Seo almost calls an unlocking company, but Wong's roommate arrives and lets them in after he lies about being the driver's nephew. As Seo begins searching Wong's room, Lee keeps his roommate distracted by lying that her boyfriend is going to introduce her to his family, which consists only of Wong and his wife, and asks him for advice. Although the man talks very highly of Wong, He implies that the couple has some beef among them and warns Lee about how much of a nutjob his wife can be. Meanwhile, Xiao finds a fancy, somewhat girly phone in Wang's drawer and keeps it before the two bid farewell to the nice guy and head to a convenience store. After joining all the dots, Lee is convinced that Tao and Wang are married, but still doesn't understand their motive behind something so daring and frankly stupid. Xiao suggests since they aren't at the top of the police's suspect list this time, they can volunteer to share information and narrow the list of suspects down to 2 people, saving everyone their time. Zhang greets them with utmost respect for once, and they even get to escape the interrogation rooms. Lee explains why they got off on an earlier stop after hearing a mentally unstable woman on the bus chant something along the lines of blowing everything up at 1:45. They'd also mentioned that dagger she was carrying and the weird smell that her cooker was giving off. Though the police find their information a bit strangely accurate, they go on to imply that she seemed to know the driver and that he was in on her little explosive excursion. As the discussion takes a halt, the director looks into Lee and Xiao's past records, while Zhang suspects that they have an underlying motive for being so knowledgeable about this incident. Later, he decides to interrogate them again and asks Xiao to draw him a diagram of all the passengers on the bus. One gives him a very accurate and descriptive account of everyone. Thanks to the countless times he has died and been resuscitated, Zhang suspects him, instead of being impressed. To put into a test, he tells him to draw a map of the police station from the front gate to the room they are in now, and though he's a little daunted, Xiao manages to do it, finally earning his respect. Suddenly, his underling's phone rings with the same tone as that of the bomb's timer, which visibly startles Lee. However, Xiao covers it up by saying his girlfriend has survivor syndrome. Zhang doesn't completely believe him, but things take a twist for good when they confirm a cooker's remains with gunpowder on the bus, Wang and Tao's marriage, and the fact that Tao worked as a chemist and had access to all the raw material for a bomb. However, being the main characters doesn't help Lee and Xiao as they come under the light of suspicion once again when it is discovered that they almost broke into Wang's house a few hours ago and fished for information at his office. Upon being questioned by Zhang about it, Xiao throws a bit of a tantrum, revealing that it's his guilt-stricken girlfriend who pushed them to become 180 investigators, and he only went along so she could find some peace. This results in a pep talk from Zhang, instead of more info on the clues, and ends when he receives a call from the director. It turns out that Zhang went to investigate Tao's residence and discovered that the garage was full of explosive chemicals, and that she was indeed making a bomb. As the police's suspicion of Lee and Xiao declines, Xiao comes clean about the girly phone they found in his bag and pitches the idea that the time 1:45 might be important to the couple. Lee inquires about the couple's kids and learns that they had a daughter who died 5 years ago. This reminds her of a conversation she had with Wang, in which he revealed that his daughter went to the same college as her. As things begin to fall into place, the police discover that the SIM in the flowery phone belongs to Wang's daughter, Mengming, and that she died in a traffic accident at 1:45 on the same bus that her parents blew. When Zhang shares this information with the duo, and Lee tries to milk him for more information, Xiao gets into a lover's quarrel with her to make her appear less suspicious, which works, and they end up learning a safe way to approach this problem for their next rewind, and getting Zhang's personal phone number. When the next cycle begins, Xiao wakes up to discover that his nose is on its period, and that he's getting weaker with each cycle. However, with no time to spare, he takes a picture of Tao and texts Zhang, with all the information they have. As the police dispatch a team to tackle the threat, Lee and Xiao buy them time to reach the next stop by bringing up the molester drama once again. Though it does buy them a few minutes, Wang refuses to stop the bus at the next station where Zhang awaits them, in order to get to the bridge at 1:45. As police cars tail them, Ta takes out her dagger and threatens everyone to stay put, only for Xiao to channel his inner white knight. As he takes other people's help to subdue her, Wang overruns police vehicles to get to the bridge, convinced that his dead daughter is waiting for them in heaven. Lee argues that his daughter's death has nothing to do with the people currently on board, but Wang suffers from an emotional outburst upon hearing his daughter's name instead. As the policemen finally manage to stop the vehicle, Xiao breaks the window and hands the bomb over to Zhang, only for it to burst right before he dumps it into the river. As Zhang loses his life to this tragedy and Xiao recovers from his injuries at the hospital, he and Li scrutinize Mengming's death and come across a video of her banding at the bus door and grabbing the driver's arms. The comments under the post call her a brainless bitch who deserved to become the road's fodder, which Li finds insensitive, especially when seen from a parent's perspective. As her insight into Tao's villain arc becomes clearer, the police director investigates the driver of Mengming's bus. However, he denies knowing the reason why she wanted to get off the bus so desperately. The inspector of that case informs the director that the case was simple and was closed after Wang signed a compensation agreement, and it was assumed that the girl wanted to get off the bridge after missing her stop. After rewatching all the tapes from the bus, the director deduces that the reason behind her desperation was a threat to her safety, but fails to find any proof of it. They also learn that after their daughter's death, Tao became mentally unstable and quit her job, while Wang became depressed and cut off from the world. Even as they are investigated, both of them take the entire blame for instigating the plan and try to save the other, while Wang believes his daughter's death was his fault since he didn't pick up his phone when she called him on her final day. Looking back, it turns out that he was on duty the day she died and was later pressured to sign the compensation agreement. Tao, on the other hand, became neurotic after she overheard some men talking about molesters on the bus and started harassing every young woman she could find to gain information about it. It went on for months until drivers refused to stop the bus whenever they saw her and Wang, and officers threatened them into staying put. Things went south when Tao stumbled across the video under which everyone shit-talked Mengming and took out her frustration on poor Wang by psychologically torturing him with his daughter's ringtone. She repeatedly blamed him for not picking up her call and even resorted to treating him like her punching bag. This drove him to suggest that they move to the city and exact revenge on the scumbags who could care less about their innocent daughter, and Tao hopped right in. They began their new lives, Wang as an upstanding bus driver and Tao as the Machiavellian responsible for creating a bomb, until the night when her garage caught fire. Wang, who had fallen into his second good life, tried to convince his wife that revenge would never bring them their daughter back. However, Tao's pettiness knew no bounds and she still insisted on taking out her frustration with a bomb. Back in the present, Li calls up her teacher in hopes of uncovering some truth about Mengming's death, since they went to the same college, which leads them to an online group chat from 5 years ago. Zhang overhears their conversation and decides to help them, and collectively, they shortlist a user who blames a molester on the bus for Mengming's actions. On Zhang's request, Li's teacher looks into old hostel records to find this user and brings them to an alumnus who now works as an architect. This girl initially tries to shrug them off and even feigns ignorance to her comment. However, when Zhang shows off his police muscle to her, she finally gets off her high horse. While having a meltdown, she recalls her emo punk era and reveals that she took the same bus as Mengming on the day that she died. While she was busy snapping some duck faces, she watched a jerk approach poor Mengming from behind and grope her, and while she was startled to see it, she ended up taking a photo of it. The jerk caught her, but she managed to escape and called her mother as soon as she got off the bus. However, that selfish bitch only cared about her own daughter and told her not to tell anyone about the man on the bus. Although she listened to her mother back then, her guilt after learning about Mengming's death made her call out everyone who was thrashing her on the college portal, only to be silenced once again when labeled as a bystander who perpetuated her death. She further reveals that she conveniently still has the picture she took of the jerk on the bus, which she shares with both Li and John. Meanwhile, Xiao vomits out blood and worries that his health is deteriorating. Sometime later, as Li returns to the hospital, he tells her to correctly remember the picture's drive link and Zhang's phone number, and implores her to take the lead during the next and potentially final cycle, even if he can't be there with her. This makes Li cry as she worries that she might not remember anything about him when she wakes up after the day is saved. Xiao uses this chance to raise her up and ask her to be his girlfriend, which Li obviously accepts without wasting the opportunity to smooch him. The next cycle begins after they both fall asleep, and almost as if he jinxed it, Xiao doesn't wake up this time. As a distressed, Li is forced to play the lone hero. She informs Zhang about the culprits and the bomb, and bribes Zhou into helping her with the promise of being handsomely rewarded. After the police unit's dispatch and Zhang puts her on an ongoing line, she gets Lu on her side by using his codename and begins her work. As the men subdue Tao, and she begins to yell in protest, Lu takes away the bomb, while Li asks everyone to help her by telling them about the bomb. Wang notices this and hits the brakes, which sets Tao free to pull the explosives valve, only for Xiao to show up like a knight in shining armor. After a lot of struggle from the police, the bus comes to a halt. However, Wang decides to take action this time and goes after the bomb in Lu's possession. As they all begin to pull and snatch it, Li uses her trump card, Mengming's sob story, to emotionally manipulate Wang, and reveals the picture of the molester to him. promising to go after him if he lets go of the bomb right now. Zhang also hops on the bandwagon and gives him his word, which finally brainwashes the driver into abandoning his mission. With the bomb finally in his hand, Zhang throws it into the river, just in time, and finally saves the day. As the dust settles, the molester is captured and given his long overdue punishment. The bereaved parents find peace, even as they serve their sentence, and Li and Xiao officially begin their relationship. Not long after, all the passengers on the bus are awarded titles and generously rewarded for their bravery. Jiao and Mei settle their family and financial issues. Lu finally gets to keep a cat, and Meng Ming's grave is finally paid a visit. This brings us to the end of Li and Xiao's time travel. Comment reset below to let us know you enjoyed this story, and make sure to like and subscribe. See you guys in the next video.